Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles, the Friday podcast about your Kindle books and all things Amazon. I'm Len Edgerly. Today is October 12th, 2018. Well, I traveled to New York City and back today on Amtrak's Acela, which gave me a chance to organize the show for recording here tonight back home in Cambridge. I won't be able to tell you why I was in the Big Apple until next week, so as the folks at Amazon often tell us in interviews, I'll have to ask you to stay tuned. Earlier this week, I spoke with Dave Slusher of the Evil Genius podcast. That's one of the earliest shows in the podosphere. With the aid of an impressive bit of do-it-yourself technology, he is scanning his vast library of paper books in order to declutter his home and have them available in the cloud for future reading.
Well, really and truly, what I'm doing is I'm moving my hoarding from physical hoarding to digital hoarding.
Also this week, I will share highlights of Data Guy's Digital Book World presentation, which I had to leave early in order to catch my flight from Nashville to Boston last week. We will also check in with a couple of ways Alexa is getting smarter, one that is real and one that is only a vision glimpsed in a patent filing. First up in news, I spent part of my train rides today reviewing Data Guy's slides, which showed that news of the plateauing of ebook sales has been, like reports of Mark Twain's death, greatly exaggerated. Data Guy, whose real name is Paul, according to the email I received from him, began his Digital Book World talk with a chart showing that what we've been hearing for some time now, U.S. ebook sales hitting a peak of $242 million in 2013, then falling steadily down to $162 million last year. That's a 33% drop in annual sales for ebooks. The sources for that data are industry standards Nielsen BookScan and PubTrack Digital. Data Guy then detoured to information showing a similar lackluster trend for digital sales of video games between 2010 and 2016. He popped the cork of his bubbly ebook analysis when he showed how the video game industry in 2017 realized it had been seriously understating digital sales. The restated data flipped the trend lines and showed a steep multi-year upward trend for digital. Data Guy told us in the audience at Digital Book World to expect a similar restatement of ebook sales next year or in 2020. It seems like what's really afoot here is a duel or competition between two rival sources of book industry data. The legacy data source, BookScan, which is run by a company named NPD, and Bookstat, which grew out of Data Guy's initial analysis in partnership with the indie author Hugh Howey. They created a site called AuthorEarnings.com. Data Guy told Digital Book World that his Bookstat data show an ebook market size of $538 million in 2017. That's more than 3 times bigger than the $162 million reported by BookScan and other traditional methods. I don't pretend to know enough about book statistics to weigh into this data fray in any detail, but I have a lot of respect for the Author Earnings initiative, and if I had to bet, I'd go with the higher ebook sales estimates. It's never made sense to me that ebook sales are actually declining, except perhaps due to the insanely high prices the Big Five are charging for ebooks. But it does seem very plausible that the exploding market for self-published ebooks and the steady increase in Amazon Publishing's market share, because they're pricing books in a sane way, mean that higher ebook estimates are most likely to be correct. Next in news are a couple of items about Alexa, Amazon's always getting smarter AI. In a real story, Amazon and Microsoft have continued their partnering ways with an Alexa Xbox skill that lets you control your Xbox video game console with voice commands given to an Alexa-enabled device, like an Echo Dot. I got to turn my Alexa off here so she doesn't think we're talking about her. The integration is part of the October 2018 Xbox update, and that's according to a post in Amazon's Day One blog, which you can find at blog.aboutamazon.com. To use the skill, you can simply say, Alexa, open Xbox, or you can enable the Xbox skill via the Alexa app on your smartphone. Once the skill is open, you can say, Alexa, open Fortnite. That's a wildly popular video game these days, I hear. I downloaded it to my iPhone just to take a look at it. Some kind of a shooter game, and I guess it's all the rage. Microsoft's Cortana voice assistant now plays nicely with Alexa, as I demonstrated a few episodes ago. And this new Xbox integration is also available via Cortana. So you could have your Echo open Cortana and have her control the Xbox instead of Alexa. This is getting a little confusing, but I think it shows that Microsoft and Amazon are not just kidding around when it comes to getting creative together on behalf of customers. In fact, Microsoft yesterday, October 11th, announced that the new third generation Echo Dot, that's an Amazon product, that's the one the size of a hockey puck, except the latest model is nicely curved and textured. That's going to be included in an Xbox bundle at Amazon, quote, while supplies last. The Echo Dot normally sells for $50. In the someday maybe Alexa category, the Telegraph in London this week reported on patents that Amazon filed for a version of Alexa that could automatically detect from the sound of your voice when you're ill. This Dr. Alexa could then offer to sell you some medicine. These types of stories, I think, are often written in a "can you believe this" tone that seems a little bit silly to me. When inventors squint their vision so as to see possibilities years or decades from now, I don't think it's surprising that they come up with ideas that seem strange in the context of the present. The other reaction I had to this patent when I read the story was that it reminded me of predictions that Forrester's seer James McQuivey, a frequent guest on the show, has offered in the past. I remember him talking about Alexa might be able to detect levels of spousal anger in the voice of one of the registered users and maybe suggest a book on anger management or how to get a strong marriage. That was a good idea. In any event, the patents include an example of a woman coughing and sniffling when she speaks to an Amazon Echo, leading Alexa to suggest chicken soup or cough drops, available, of course, at Amazon.com. The patent filing also covers the McQuivey idea, saying that Alexa could track emotions such as boredom or feeling tired or sad. What to do with that information? The patent filing suggests that a singer perhaps could pay for advertisements for her new album, which would only be played to people who sounded tired or bored. To its credit, the Telegraph reporter included this caveat. Amazon's patent filing does not definitively prove that the company is working on any of the features described, however. Technology companies file many patents, including for aborted products and ideas which will never get past the drawing board. I'm getting increasingly aware of the differences in how comfortable people are with technology. Early adopters, slow adopters. You'll hear that Dave Slusher is a intelligently slow adopter. I really enjoyed hearing him talk about the pace of technology in his own life. I find myself thinking an idea like this is pretty cool, that if Alexa can actually pick up information from my moods and some kind of response can come tailored to that, that just intrigues me. I'm obviously, these kinds of things, at every step of the complexity and the intelligence of these agents, there's opportunity for bad things to happen if they fall into the wrong hands, and that makes me uneasy. I'm not completely blind to those possibilities, but I'd be curious what your own feelings are about this patent idea that if Alexa can start detecting your moods and the responses are tailored to it, does that totally creep you out, or does that make you think that this device could just become more useful? You can send me your thoughts on that topic or anything else at podchronicles@gmail.com. Time now for the interview. Dave Slusher's Evil Genius Chronicles podcast, he calls it a journal of geekery, music, and joy, made its debut in August of 2004. That makes him one of the earliest voices in the podosphere. I love that word, the podosphere. I looked it up. It's actually a word, P-O-D-O, sphere. That's where we're meeting each other each week, in the podosphere. Dave's day job is developer advocate at ServiceNow, a software platform that supports IT service management and automates common business processes. I'm a regular listener to Dave's show because I find his thinking out loud ruminations on work, technology, books, and joy invigorating and always original. He speaks in a way that I kind of aspire to sometimes. It just seems like he's thinking out his life on the show. It's quite intimate, and a lot of times it's quite bold, so a lot of times it's quite moving. So he's one of the voices that I listen to regularly. We last spoke on my show in January of 2016, and a recent project of Dave's, a do-it-yourself book scanner, made me think it'd be a good time to have him back on the show. Now, some of this is pretty technical, but it does get to the more general topics if you stay with it in the interview. And if you aspire to lighten your own load of physical books while saving them in digital form, you may want to really listen to this conversation closely while you're taking notes. There will also be links in the show notes to the resources that he mentions. I caught up with Dave on Tuesday afternoon, October 8th, Cambridge time, and that was 6 a.m. in Sydney, Australia, where ServiceNow is holding its NowForum conference. Dave had presented a pre-conference workshop the day before as part of an around-the-world trip for his company. It included flying business class with a lie-down bed by way of Fiji, so some of it sounded pretty cool, but it sounded also fairly grueling. I began by asking where he found the instructions that he followed to build a do-it-yourself book scanner.
I don't know the guy's real name. His username Mohib on the DIY book scanner forum. And so this forum has been around, at least 10 years, I got to say. And it started on the original founder of that site was a guy who created a design for basically like a wooden cradle that would be the original DIY book scanner. And he had plans that you could feed a sheet or two of plywood into a CNC cutter. And it would cut out, basically, it would be almost like a flat pack IKEA type furniture. That when you're done, you would assemble it, and you would get this V-shaped cradle that you would hold a book in. And then you would get yourself made basically a matching V-shaped platen. And then you would get these various pulleys so that you could lift this plexiglass platen up. And then you would set up these two cameras so that each camera was shooting a page. So you've basically got the book is open, it's held down with glass, and then you're shooting two photos like with an external trigger, like each time. That was the original founding design that I think the guy's name is Daniel Reitz, and he set this up a long time ago. And I even we talked about this the last time we talked, right? Is that I wanted to build one of those things. It was just beyond me. I couldn't do this thing. And so then this user Mohib, for some reason, this is not even a particularly new post. It's probably a year or so old, like the thread on this forum. So on this same site where this guy originally posted those plans, he's also got a forum, and people, for all these years have been discussing various ways to do it, whether it's building and improving his original design or trying other ways about it. And so it was one of these things. You know how sometimes there will be a blog post or a news article or that is, somewhere between a week and 2 years old, and it just catches new traction. This was one of those things. A couple Lifehacker, it wasn't Lifehacker, but it was sites like that were picking this thing up. Oh, here's a way to scan your books, which immediately, piques my interest because I've been following this project for so long. And it turns out that, so basically what Mohib had done is created a design that simplified every aspect of that. So instead of having two DSLR cameras, in the intervening years, phone cameras have gotten extremely good. So now you don't really need as much. You can get as many pixels of book captured via a cell phone as you could have by a DSLR 10 years ago. And so he basically is doing also in software some of the things. Well, even with that DSLR, you had two sets of. You're taking basically pictures on two cameras, and you had to figure out some way to assemble a book out of that. Yeah. So you had all these kind of software solutions that would do that. And so Mohib figured out a plan that you can just take some PVC pipe, and hook it together, and it makes you an arm that will hold the cell phone over your book. And then with a Bluetooth trigger, which he has his zip taped down, and mine is just literally duct taped to the handle of my platen. And you get into this rhythm where you can turn a page, drop the platen down on the book, take a picture, and then do that basically as quickly as you can. And when you're done, you have a bunch of you basically do it each side of the book one direction. So I start from the right side of the pages, front to back. Then I flip the book over and I do back to front, upside down, basically, of the other side of the page. So now I've got two chunks of book, basically. And there's various programs that you run it through, and when you're done, it sounds a little bit kooky, but when you're done, you actually have a usable ebook file.
And what formats are you creating when you create the files?
I have written, like the original poster has exactly the opposite operating systems for me on everything. He has a Windows PC, he has an iPhone, and I have Android phones and a Mac. Mm-hmm. So I went through and I created my own kinds of scripts to do this. So and I'm an engineer, so this is kind of the thing I do. I'm not that good at physical stuff, but once it came to the the software of it, I had no problem mm-hmm. writing OS X scripts to handle this thing. And so what I do is I have emulated his scripts, and there's a program called Scan Tailor, which is built specifically for this sort of thing, like when you bulk document scan. It's actually really good at figuring out, of this chunk of the picture, what is actually the part that should be kept. Huh. And you kind of do a pre-processing step with this. So when you're done, what you don't have is like a photo of the page. It's more like a black and white version of the page. And it will do some things like it will do some deskew. It will select what is the content area. And so I process it through that, and I get a series of TIFF files. Then I run the script, and the script kind of puts it in the right order, and there's a little bit of checking, like it needs to be the same number of files, and if they're not, you may have missed one, and you have to do a little bit of there's a little bit of error correction in there. Then my script runs through. It takes those TIFF files and it does two things. It converts the whole thing to a PDF. Mm-hmm. So at this point, let's say you got like a 300-page book. You're going to have, like a gig of TIFF files from this, something like that. Mm-hmm. But then you'll end up with maybe a 20 meg PDF file. Mm-hmm. But then it will also run through a Google. I think it was originally a Google project. It was a open source OCR engine called Tesseract. And that will actually do the OCR. So at the same time that I'm doing all that, I'm actually creating a text file as well. And the text file for there may be commercial programs that do a little better, but for the free project that I just downloaded and installed on my Mac, it does surprisingly well. And then I just downloaded one other program that cleans up. What do you call it when the letters run together? Ligature.
Yeah.
The OCR creates. There's a couple things that it creates these weird ligatures for pretty consistently. I want to say like if it's an F and an L adjacent, it creates these weird characters. But there's a program that you can run through that will convert all those. It basically converts everything like that. The Unicode characters into straight ASCII characters. So it undoes all that ligature stuff. And by the time you're done, it's by far not a commercial quality ebook, right? You wouldn't publish the thing that came out of it, but it would be ready for a copy editor. It's maybe 98%. Something like that.
And then if you have that text file, would you make a conversion to make it a Mobi file to read on a Kindle, or would you just read it on a Kindle as a text file?
I'm reading them on the as a text file. Mm-hmm. If for some reason I found that there was too much OCR problem, I have the PDF. I could read it like on a Kindle Fire.
Right.
But my desire is always to read it on. I prefer e-ink Kindles for reading. Mm-hmm. So I don't particularly, I don't want to consume the battery life it takes to read it on, via PDF on the Kindle Fire. So I'd much rather get it on my e-ink Kindle, if at all possible. And thus far, I have not found one. Now, I'll be honest too. I have done more playing with the program than reading the books. So from spot checking them, they look pretty good. I also have not read any of these books beginning to end. So somewhere by the time I get done with this trip, I'm sure one of them will have happened. But it's so I have not. For example, started at page 1 and found out that from page 40 to page 60 was just unreadable.
Yeah,
that's possible, but I haven't experienced that from beginning to end yet. But for right now, it's like it's really pleasantly, like my expectation of the quality of the output is been a pleasant surprise how good it is.
Now, how many books so far have you scanned using your new device?
I did I did 3 or 4 that were all test runs. So the first couple that I did, I tried to stick to really short books because I wasn't sure exactly what I was doing, and it's kind of there is a little bit of finesse to this because it takes a certain rhythm to get things going, and the part of the difference between what made this feasible and not feasible was this $8 Saucony sticky mat that it's like a nano. The word nano is in it somewhere. Some kind of like nano tube science fictional super adhesive mat, reusable mat. And the main problem that I had in the first couple runs of this was that the book would move around.
Right.
And so now you've got this drift. You've got this physical drift of the book. It's just sliding back and forth. And I tried these various hacks to keep that from happening. The first of which was just duct taping a T-square onto my desk so that I had this place to both put the book. I had a little corner that I could kind of try to slide the book into. And then I had the ruler on the side of it that I could see. Is the edge of the book at the same point on the ruler as it has been, when I started? And so the first couple, the quality of the OCR noticeably suffered by the fact that the ScanTailer output was not as good because the books are in different orientation over the course of the scanning, etc. I got that Saucony mat, which really holds it down quite well, and the output got extremely good after that point.
Wow.
So that was like the secret weapon of this project.
And so you, I think I heard maybe in the podcast version of this, you're doing about 600 pages an hour at this point?
Yeah, and so that's at this point the whole discussion with Mohib, and so I posted, a link to my blog post on that forum, and there's been some back and forth between me and Mohib and some of the other users about, it's basically a group of engineers discussing how we can improve this, and Mohib can do around 1,000 pages an hour. And so everything that I'm trying to do now is less about quality and more about throughput. Because, if I can double what I'm doing, then I can get these books out of my house at twice the rate. And that's ultimately the end goal of this whole bizarre experiment, was to get books out of my house.
Well, let's go back to the genesis, because it's fascinating in that your relationship with books is, I think, somewhat original compared to people that cherish books and use them as evidence of how smart they are in their homes or other aesthetic purposes. Why did you want to get these books out of your house?
Well, I have these different populations of books. I have the books that are completely disposable and I just don't mind getting rid of. At one point, I moved from Portland, Oregon to Atlanta. And I've made multiple moves, although for about the last 14 years, I've been in the same house. And, at that time, there was a period when I was doing the Reality Break radio show that I was getting boxes of books from the science fiction publishers. So, which initially sounds like a dream, and then it quickly becomes a nightmare as you get every 3 weeks you get another box of books, and quickly they pile up and you've got nowhere to put them. And there may be one or two you care about in each box and a bunch you don't, and then there's got to be a place for these to go, because So like the standard that I gave myself was, I said, let's imagine I had a mythical day where I could read a book every day that entire year. And I would look at a book and I would say, would this be in the top 365 books in this house? If yes, I would keep it. If maybe, I would keep it. If the answer was clearly no, I put it in a box and got rid of it. So then, so I've already kind of culled most of the books that were not a hard decision to get rid of. So now what I've got is basically a house full of books, and even after all that, there's again I paid shipping costs for some of these books to move them around. They've probably moved 40,000 miles, and I'm paying $1 a pound every time. And so I've got all these books, none of which I don't want to read. If I still have them, it's because I want to read it. But and most of them are not new books. In fact, practically none of them are newer than the last 20 years, and which means that they're kind of in a dead zone for ebooks. So a lot of them are not popular enough to have gotten an ebook. There's something that's been out of print for the last 10 or 15 years or more, and I'm not going to get a legitimate electronic version. But I still want to read the book, and I still have been toting the book around for all this time. And so if I read a book on paper, which is increasingly rare, I would not read a prized book. I would read one of the books from this group, because I want to read a book that if it were finished, I could get rid of it. And so I don't read the books I most want to read. I read the books I most want to get rid of. And which is this weird. It's a weird way to approach life, right?
Well, this will solve that problem. You'll be getting rid of a lot of the books without having to read them, and then you can read them on the same basis of the rest of your library, whichever book is the best one to read next.
Well, really and truly, what I'm doing is I'm moving my hoarding from physical hoarding to digital hoarding. But I'm in favor of that maneuver, right?
Yeah.
The bits and bytes are they're cheaper to store, and they take up a lot less room, and so I'm okay with that. So ultimately, all this stuff, I've figured this out about myself, is that I'm not a tidy person. I'm a bit of a hoarder, and books are books fall into that category, but everything. But in a lot of cases, that's really a physical manifestation of procrastination. Is that I don't want to make the decision of what to do with this thing, and so they end up in a pile somewhere, because those piles are decisions I never made. And now I'm sort of kicking that can down the road again, which is I should just read this book, but I'm not. I don't have time to read it right now, so I'm going to scan the book. I'm going to get the digital copy, save it for myself, and then not read it that way. So I'm just choosing the format in which I'm going to not read it.
Exactly.
But all these things are aspirational, right? Because my ideal self is the person who read these books. I have, a bunch of Philip Roth books I've never read, and a bunch of Anthony Burgess, and I had, particularly a lot of these date back to when I was in college, and I had this period where it wasn't so much the book. Again, it was like the books I wanted to have read. I wanted to be the guy who read a bunch of Anthony Burgess books, and I read some of them, but I have like 15 of them I haven't read.
When I see the work that you're going to create this digital archive, and I'm just in the process of helping my parents move out of a house that they've lived in for 40 years. And there's all of these books, and there's a real reluctance to get rid of them. And there's this idea that they're going to end up with the heirs. They're going to be part of the estate, and some of us are going to, decide which of these books we want. Now, you're a young man. You're probably not planning your demise at this point, but can you imagine setting it up at some point in the future so these digital books can be conveyed to your heirs?
Yeah, I mean that would be a fairly easy thing to do. I mean, it's in the same way that any of my digital life is going to go forward. I basically am saving them in Dropbox. So anyone that has access to that will get that, in perpetuity. It will be one of those things where, honestly, I've been through this process myself, because my brother and I sold my mother's house.
All right. And
we did the estate sale, and we did all that stuff. And, we went from sentimental to heartless quite quickly in the course of this process. And there were a number of books that we sold at the estate sale that, in a slightly different mindset, I might have considered hanging on to some of these books. But there were, again, my mother was a reader and an English teacher, and so there were thousands of books in this house, and I didn't want to carry. I want to have a net reduction of books, and so I didn't want to carry them in. If there had been something so special that I really would have felt a loss if I didn't get it, then and again, all that preceded this particular project. I might have brought it home with me, scanned them, and got rid of them that way. So just had a very short residence time, as they're on their way somewhere else, and then I scan them. So that's part of what that's part of what I'm trying to do, is give myself a reason that I can keep these physical goods moving and still get everything I want out of them, which is, all this time I don't really care about books. I care about the stories. I care about the words. And the book is just a transfer mechanism. But the book, by and large, other than sentimental, there are very few sentimental ones. There are in some cases signed copies, a few things like that. But that's 5% of my books.
Yeah, you mentioned one. I think somewhere that there was. Which one was that?
Or the Buckminster Fuller book.
The Buckminster Fuller one.
Yeah,
is that going to make the cut of physical books that stay with you?
Yes, I will always keep that one. That is such an odd book. It's basically it's a hierarchically, taxonomically sorted catalog of his ideas. So it's almost like he's got his own kind of Dewey Decimal type system, and there are these like numbered point. So he's got idea 100.17, and so they're all grouped together. And so the geodesic dome and everything kind of related to that is a chunk of this. And he was very much about he had the interesting architectural philosophy that as much should be done with tension as possible rather than compression, because you can only make cement so strong, but wires get thinner and stronger all the time. So if you look at Buckminster Fuller designs for houses, they were basically like platforms held up by cables, kind of like a suspension bridge. And so he would have these interesting ideas. And so this book, it's probably 1,000 pages long, but it's literally just lists of concepts and ideas and plans of things. And in fact, the story of the guy who was his collaborator in assembling that book was I think they worked on it for 10 years, and Fuller was still changing things. And so at one point they said, his collaborator said, "This is the last edit." And he said, "Okay, great. Well, I just have one more set of changes." "All right. Well, I'll take these changes." And he just took the thing, didn't look at them, threw them in the trash, and then they published the book.
Oh, my God. And that's Synergetics. That's the name of it?
Synergetics, yeah.
Yeah.
It's my favorite book, and it's not even really a book. It's just this bizarre encyclopedia of facts.
I watched a video of the updated scanner, and it was an oddly calming rhythm to it. You lift the platen up, you change the page, you put it down, you press the button, and if you're doing that for an hour, what are you thinking about?
It is a little bit zen in that you do get in the rhythm. The one thing that you're really trying to do is make sure that you're not missing a page, because that really does that is like the big hitch in this, is that if you get every page scanned, it's actually much less problem to scan a page twice than it is to miss a page. Because when I'm done, if I go back and I look at that and I realize I'm missing, say, 3 pages out of 300, now I have to find the 3 pages, go back, reacquire them, get them into the right place, and that significantly adds time to it. Whereas if you have 1 or 2 extras, if in doubt, let's say you blanked out and you just didn't remember if you had clicked the button for this page, you just click it again, and then once you find that page, you just delete that one file, and then I have a little script that will renumber them, and we'll go back and fill in the gaps and start from 1 and renumber everything.
You've learned which mistake is better to make.
Absolutely. But the part of the discussion with Mohib is he has a technique where he basically has figured out the latency on his phone between when he presses the little Bluetooth trigger and when the photo actually snaps.
Oh.
And so I had been working to try to get that number as low as possible, because you've got two big problems with the physical setup there, which is over the course of depending on the size of the book, over the course of scanning it, the distance between the page and the phone is going to change.
Oh.
And so you could adjust it, and the design has this little, what you call, it's got this little macro focus mount. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a dolly that's got a little thumb screw that moves it up and down. So you could kind of track that down, and that was kind of in the originally what he did. And then he figured out that just letting it either be on infinity focus or else just letting it autofocus is actually better than that. On my particular phone that I'm using, the autofocus at some times may take half a second. And so I don't want that, that half a second times 500 pages becomes significant.
Yeah.
And so trying to get to 1,000 pages an hour, I'm kind of trying to do that same technique, which is, not at all about the machine. It's really more about you and your thumb and your rhythm and how you get everything together. So, so I'm trying to do that same thing, which is anticipate how long it takes and try to. I'm actually pressing the button as I'm dropping the platen, so that I've got the absolute minimum amount of time between when the glass hits the paper and when the picture is acquired, and then I'm up and turning the next page, as quickly as possible.
That makes me realize there's a lot of attention at each step. It's not just sort of a mind-numbing kind of activity that you could let your focus drift. You've got to pay attention to each page and each nanosecond between the clicks.
Well, the funny thing is, almost like who was the speed reading lady?
Evelyn Wood.
Evelyn Wood. It's kind of like that because you're reading, particularly like you're reading the top corner around the page number.
Oh, yeah.
It actually is easier. It's actually better to do the upside down scanning because you find that you're reading, like the first line of dialogue or the first sentence on every page, and you realize you're kind of getting a sense of the story as you're going through there, and you're giving yourself a spoiler alert. So one of the problems is actually trying to not read the words and just look at the number and make sure I'm looking at the correct number.
Yeah.
But even though, no matter how hard you focus, you're going to drift off and you're going to think, okay, I'm looking at page 116. I don't remember if 114 was the last one I did.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at a number. So it can be tricky to kind of keep in the moment for as long as it takes.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's definitely it is a little bit soothing. It's not. There are sometimes the other thing I need to work on is the ergonomics. So Mohib talked me into originally the base was mounted to the side of the desk that I stand on, and he convinced me that's a bad design. That I should connect it, even though I didn't have a good place to connect it to the side, which is probably ideal. That I should do it to the back of the desk so I'm not leaning over the mounting post, because I did notice just my shoulders, the amount of strain that I go through to basically reach around the post and then lift it up and but try to not smack the cell phone with the handle of this platen, which once you do that, if the phone moves in the middle of this, that is semi-disastrous.
Yeah.
Because now you have to both stop. You have to recenter it. You have to try to get everything back where it was. It probably won't be where you had it before. And consistent imperfection is better than intermittent perfection with this system, because you want the thing to be able to figure out and intuit, basically from the same conditions every one of those pages.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's finish up. I remember you said that you're definitely not an early adopter of technology, and that you, for example, on ebooks or Kindle readers, you wait until there's a problem with the existing technology that you can't live with in light of what's ahead. Am I right that you're still using the Paperwhite for your e-ink books?
Yeah, I'm basically on my second Kindle. So I bought not the first generation, but when it got down to, I think I got the second generation keyboard one when it got down to maybe in the $200, $230 price range. So I didn't buy, I did not spend the $450 for that first one, although I looked at it so many times, trying to justify to myself why $450 was worth this. And so I ended up buying the Generation 2, and I hung on to that one for a long time. Until I just could no longer, I just couldn't stand it. In fact, for that second generation Kindle basically did the role of my smartphone for some time. I was fairly late to getting smartphones too, and so if I were in a situation where I needed some kind of offline access, I would use you had that WhisperSync web browser. And I would basically use that. I would check email or check Twitter from that. It was a terrible experience, but it worked.
Yeah.
And so before I had a cell phone, that's how I would do that. And then at some point when I just could no longer stand that, I got the Kindle Paperwhite, which was, I don't know, 4 years ago, something like that, maybe longer. And at this point, I like that Paperwhite enough that regardless what new wonderful versions come out, I'm not buying a new one based on how good the new one is. I'm basing it on how bad the old one is. So if I can live with what I've got, I'm going to keep it. Because if I wait, this may no longer be true, because I follow your show partly to listen to the executives that you talk to and you have to do a little bit of Kremlinology about what's the future of e-ink. You actually really doggedly pursue that when you talk to them, like, what is the future of e-ink? You try to pin them down. That's one of the reasons I love your show. And so I don't know that we can necessarily count on there being a lot of future innovation. But even so, for any electronic, the longer you wait, it's going to get a little bit cheaper, a little bit faster, a little bit lighter. And so if I bought the new version every time it came out, I would have I would have spent more money and have ultimately not as good a thing as if I wait and tiger leap over as many generations as I can stand to. So I try to make as few purchases as I can.
Makes sense. I have been speaking with Dave Slusher, creator of the Evil Genius Chronicles podcast and blog. Thanks very much, and good day.
I would say it, but I've been roundly mocked every time I've tried.
One of the advantages of interviewing a fellow podcaster on the show is that you're going to have a shared sensitivity to audio quality. And in Dave's case, he actually carried a pretty hefty microphone with him all the way to Australia, knowing that we were going to be talking there. And he made a backup recording of it on his side, which he sent to me by Dropbox. That turned out to be great because there were some moments when I couldn't hear him. There would be a long delay, and I knew he was recording it, so I didn't worry about it. And sure enough, when the file came through, everything sounded great. So he went to some extra effort to join us for that conversation, and I'm very grateful for it. That's it for this week. Next week's show will be one you won't want to miss, so I hope you will be on the lookout for it. If you have not yet subscribed to my free Kindle Chronicles email newsletter, you might want to navigate to thekindlechronicles.com, enter your name in the sign-up box. It's free, and if you're on that list, you will receive an email each week the moment that I post a new episode and a little information about the episode, and then as well as breaking news flashes if they happen to happen during the week. Just saying. Thanks again for your prayers and warm wishes for my mother, Lois, who is 89 years old. She's making good progress in her recovery from hip surgery, but our family clearly is going to be trudging a rough road for a while in this transition, and we're all grateful for the staff at the facility she's in, especially for a gifted and experienced geriatric nurse named Kay, who is now on Team Lois, and her longtime housekeeper and companion, Marie. We've got quite a number of people and cousins and people. Something like this happens, and you're always surprised at who shows up to visit and who sends wishes, and it's, for me, amplified by hearing from listeners all over the world, and there's a sense of being held by a community as you go through something that's really pretty rough, especially on my dad. And he's really holding up. He's 91, and he's a tower of strength for all of us. On another topic, I'm finishing up this week my last of 6 modules in the MIT blockchain course that I've been taking. That's through the Sloan School, and it's been a lot of work. I've had to submit assignments each week, and I've done pretty well. I've gotten good grades. I think I got 3 exceptionals and 1 good. So in my first experience at MIT, my dad's alma mater, I've been doing credibly in my homework, and it has been great because it's just showing actual things which are happening using blockchain technology. That's the technology that underlies Bitcoin, which most people have heard of. And just in all kinds of different industries, there are people that actually have been doing things over the past year or two that take advantage of the decentralized network and the privacy and the ability to update transactions immediately. And in my final assignment, I've looked ahead. I'm going to have to come up with a new blockchain project. And since what I know about is podcasting, I'm going to let myself be like a patent writer for Amazon and using some of the concepts that I've learned about blockchain, really dare to think, wouldn't it be great if when I put up a show, somehow I could see every time somebody listens to it and where and how long they listen to it and things like that. Again, maybe that would be creepy, but for somebody who puts this out into kind of the vague potosphere each week, it's something that if somebody in the blockchain uses that, it could be very interesting. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles from Cambridge, Massachusetts. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to my show. Have a great day. Bye.